Please welcome AIPAC Western States Executive Vice President, Danielle Harsip-Teplitsky.
Good evening, everyone. Despite significant IDF achievements, the threats surrounding Israel haven't disappeared. They are evolving, they are growing more complex, and they are giving rise to new challenges. Tonight, we are going to take a tour of the region together. What's changed, what hasn't, and where things are headed. To help us make sense of the threats facing Israel and the region, please join me in welcoming Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, former IDF spokesman, and trusted friend of AIPAC, IDF Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Welcome, Jonathan. It's good to see you. You have some friends in this room.
It is great to be here, and shalom, AIPAC.
So, Jonathan, Israel is facing what you and I discussed is really 6 active kinetic fronts. We have a lot to cover. We have some ambitious goals tonight, so we're just going to jump right in.
Yeah.
I want to start with Iran. We've seen what the regime has done with the protesters. We have seen that the regime is actually doubling down on their military capabilities. We're going to dive really deep into Iran here, but what we want to talk about first is the ballistic missiles.
Yeah, which is the right place to start, because those are the teeth of the regime. That is how they are trying to terrorize and menace Israelis. That is what they will try to use in order to kill Israelis. So that's exactly where we want to start. As you said, before we go into what the regime is doing, I think we need to acknowledge that the Iranian people still hasn't given up.
Yep,
they're out on the streets. They're out there. They are out there now as we speak on university campuses and protesting against the regime, saying death to the dictator, and they want freedom, and they're doing so knowing that they're risking their lives because between 30 and 40,000 of their countrymen were butchered. So we'll speak about a lot of big things, but we'll recognize their bravery and hope that they won't be left unanswered. So in terms of the regime, we see them rebuilding, focusing assets on rebuilding their military infrastructure in order to produce more missiles. They're almost back at May 25 levels. They're, by the way, not doing it alone. They have Chinese help, Russian help, but the bottom line is that they are working hard in order to replenish the missiles. And what this means for Israel is that the Iranians learned a lot during Operation Rising Lion. And I think they understand that they will have a narrow opportunity if in 25 they fired hundreds of missiles over a period of many days. They will have a short window of opportunity, and the assessment is that they will fire thousands, almost everything that they have, which has the potential of becoming extremely lethal in Israel.
And sorry to interrupt, but is Israel prepared for that?
I think it is, but I think we're going to do offense and defense simultaneously. We have undoubtedly the best air defense system in the world. We have the best air force in the world, represented by Tal Kelman here just before, so adequately. But the bottom line is that I think if we're fair and honest about it, there will be missiles that will get through, and there will be casualties in Israel. That's why the ballistic missiles matter so much. So it's also a threat to the U.S., 3 U.S. assets in the region, U.S. bases, other U.S. allies, and I would say it's a threat to U.S. deterrence and general standing. Part of the bigger link here, Iran, of course, isn't alone. We know that tech is proliferated, so what the Iranians develop and manufacture is shared with the Russians, is shared with the Chinese. They get influence, so it's all bad actors supporting each other.
So you've described the challenge of the ballistic missiles. We know that there's a diplomatic negotiation going on.
Yeah.
Do you see the Iranians acquiescing on that point, on ballistic missile production?
Mostly no. Just before we came on, I saw first time that the Iranians are actually starting to budge a bit, which is new. But generally speaking, I will put that under the column of Iranians just playing for time and using diplomacy as a tool of deceiving. But what really bothers me is, there's a tremendous amount of unaccounted for enriched material in Iran, right? At around 400 kilograms of military-grade enriched material, which we know that the regime has, but we don't yet know what they're doing with it. I think it's important for people to understand that nuclear bombs can be delivered in different ways. The standard way that we think of is with a missile, but they can be put on a vehicle, and a vehicle can be driven close enough for impact. And that is why it's so important that there will be zero enrichment on Iranian soil, because they cannot be trusted. And secondly, everything already enriched needs to be taken out of Iranian hands.
So yes. So you're describing a scenario that I don't think we all really think about a lot, right? A different mechanism to deliver a nuclear device, which is frightening.
Yeah.
They would necessarily need to lean on proxies in order to do that. Now, Israel has made great strides over the last couple of years in degrading those proxies.
Yeah.
But what's the update as you see it right now for the proxies?
So the infrastructure is still there. They've been beaten a bit, but they're still there. In Lebanon, as Sarit just pointed out, they are rebuilding. The IDF, is operating there because there's a need to it. But when we look at what the Iranians are doing, Lebanon, Syria to a certain extent, but Iraq, Yemen, to name a few places where they are investing money that they don't have. It is, instead of putting it in water infrastructure and electricity infrastructure in Iran, they are investing it in their proxy network. And that, of course, has implications for Israel. Significant military capabilities at the end of the day. And just to show you the priorities of the Iranian regime, budget is usually the most purest form of an organization's priorities. The amount of money that the Iranian regime has transferred to Hezbollah in 2025 is estimated to be $1 billion US. That's money that they don't have. That's money that is missing from elsewhere, but they choose to invest it in Hezbollah because they want Hezbollah to regain capabilities that were destroyed by Israel.
So I want to stay on Hezbollah, but first, you mentioned Yemen very briefly. What about the Houthis? We see them as a threat, but what's your assessment of how threatening they really are?
They definitely are threatening, but I think the important part to understand with the Houthis is how directly tethered they are to the regime in Iran, how dependent they are. If and when that regime will fall, so will the Houthis as well, and they will return to oblivion and basically not being mentioned by anybody.
Okay. So let's stay on Hezbollah and talk about Lebanon.
Yeah.
I think there was some hope that there would be political will to disarm Hezbollah. We've seen that there's been a little bit of success, but not much. What's your situational assessment of what's going on in Lebanon?
I would say progress, and I'm happy for that progress, which was achieved by the hard work of the IDF and Mossad and others, and I'm extremely grateful for that as an Israeli, and I think every free person in the world should be. But it's unfinished business. It's unfinished business because Hezbollah, as we speak, they are stockpiling weapons. They are desperately working to replenish their capabilities, long-range missiles, accurate missiles, and other types of weapons. The IDF continues to strike Hezbollah based on very accurate and updated intel. Just a day or so ago, there was a significant strike up in Baalbek, the northeastern part of Lebanon, where Israel actually took out a senior Hezbollah commander responsible for the missile unit. So no coincidence, but this goes on. And I note with disappointment the failed efforts of the Lebanese armed forces to do what the Lebanese state committed to doing, and that is to disarm Hezbollah.
Is that lack of political will? Excuse me, but is it lack of political will, or is actually just the inability to do it?
I would say that it's a mix of both.
Okay.
Hezbollah is a tough nut to crack, definitely in Lebanon with the Iranian support, but at the end of the day, the Lebanese armed forces have not really pushed through. They've taken the low-hanging fruit, but they haven't gone for the difficult, hard cases where they actually need to confront Hezbollah. Hezbollah knows that. And at the end of the day, if we look forward, where is all this going to go? This front is going to continue to be a combat front for Israel. There's going to be instability and maybe violence. as soon as we take our foot off the gas. And I hope that doesn't happen. Very important that Israel retains operational freedom, the ability to work through the coordination mechanism with the Americans and strike Hezbollah wherever we need so that they don't go back to their October 7 capabilities.
So one last question on Hezbollah and Lebanon. We saw some reports in recent days that the IRGC is actually in Lebanon. We've seen those reports. In case there's an escalation, Iran attacks Israel. We don't know what's going to happen, but the IRGC certainly wants to be in control. Are those reports accurate? How do you view that?
So, as far as I know, they are, and I don't think that IRGC ever left Lebanon in that sense. As long as Hezbollah is there, the Iranians are there. And the working assumption in Israel, and you can see it reflected on the ground, Israel is preparing itself for Hezbollah, getting involved in the fighting and firing rockets and missiles at Israeli civilians. And that's what we're preparing for, both offensively and defensively.
Okay. So let's actually shift to the West Bank, where Iran is actually trying to create another operational front against Israel. What's your assessment of what's going on there?
Well, what we have in what I would call Judea and Samaria is fertile breeding ground for terrorism. It's a result of very poor local leadership, mismanagement, corruption, and a PA that is hated and despised by the local population. A horrible education system that really brings a lot of extremism to the minds of young Arabs, many of them through UNRWA schools. And, as you said, the Iranians bringing in weapons across from Iran via Iraq, Syria, and then eventually Jordan into northern Samaria.
Yeah.
Now, they're doing that because they sense the opportunity. And while there's two things here in terms of weapons. Currently, what we have on the ground are assault rifles, heavy machine guns, and weapons of that level. What they're trying to get their hands on are strategic game-changing weapons, referring to surface-to-air missiles, long-range anti-tank missiles, and standard-grade explosives. If and when they get their hands on those types of weapons, that would be a game-changer for Israel. And, and another thing is the local production of rockets. Terrorists in Judea and Samaria are eagerly trying to duplicate what Hamas did 20 years ago in Gaza and develop rockets in order to be able to fire them at the Israelis. The only reason we don't hear a lot about Judea and Samaria is because Israel continues to do relentless counterterrorism operations. Had it not been for that, we would have been facing serious issues.
So we know that Iran is trying to use the West Bank as this operational front. It's a very different terrain than Gaza, right? And it's much closer to some major Israeli population centers, as you can see on this map.
Yeah, I mean, it's topographical real advantage.
Yeah.
And imagine a plane coming down to land in Ben Gurion and a Palestinian terrorist with surface-to-air missiles in the northern part of Samaria taking aim. Yeah. That is what we're talking about, and it is not a far-fetched scenario.
It's a scary scenario. So to sum it up, Iran is down, but not out.
Down, not out, resilient, and still focusing on destroying the state of Israel. I think the risk here regarding Iran is that they'll be able to fool the West, fool the US, using diplomacy in order to extend time and buy more time. But I think we should acknowledge, at this moment, we have a unique opportunity to really change the Middle East. For the first time in 47 years, the Iranian regime is weak. It is weak because the Iranian people have risen up and are brave enough to fight them. What they need is external help to make that happen. And if I think we can, I think we should, free the Iranian people and significantly improve the security situation for Israel.
Okay. So we will certainly see literally in the coming hours, days, and weeks how this all unfolds.
Yeah.
But I want to move now to Syria, which we've obviously, over the last year, been major changes in Syria. What's the situational assessment there?
So it's a country that is torn between different foreign influences. We have Western influences, we have local influences, and then we have jihadi influences. And you can see the different flags represented the Kurds in the northeast, the Druze close to the Israeli border in the southwest. It's still unclear how the dust will settle in Syria. However it will settle, It'll influence Israel directly, so we're of course monitoring this area very closely. And there's quite a few challenges that are emanating from it.
So what we've seen in the Middle East in the past is with a fragmented country, there's usually a power vacuum, and bad actors tend to fill those power vacuums. So what bad actors are we paying attention to here?
Well, here's a blast from the past for you. ISIS.
Okay.
We thought that we were done with that abomination of an organization, but they are very much back. Northeastern Syria, the more the Syrian regime attacks and weakens the Kurds, the more breathing room ISIS gets, and they've already issued statements, they've already recruited people, and it is definitely something that's on the Israeli map. That's one. Second issue is a nation state with significant capabilities. We see Turkey moving in wherever the Iranians are receding from. We see Turkey attempting to move in and establish this dominating posture in the Middle East. It feels to me that it's really motivated by this neo-Ottomanism, trying to reinstitute the Ottoman Empire, I think led by Erdogan himself.
By the way, by a NATO ally, let's not forget.
NATO ally, second biggest military in the alliance, biggest fleet in the Middle East. And we're looking at a country that is led by a leader who claims that he's going to be a new sultan. And from an Israeli perspective, when you see what Turkey is doing, they've defined Israel as a threat to their national security. And what they are doing is trying to achieve military parity with Israel. Tal spoke about the F-35s, what a superior fighting platform that is. They are trying actively to get their hands on it, and they would want to use it. I think, of course, that's something that shouldn't be permitted to happening, and I hope it never happens, but that is what Turkey is aspiring to do, to achieve that parity. They're looking to take advantage of their naval forces, and we see them almost always at the forefront in the information and the incitement campaign against Israel. My concern is, at this moment, that we have this mismatch between where Turkey is, rhetorically, politically, militarily, and where Israel is. We are still trying to contain and prevent escalation, while the Turks, it appears, have already made the decision to move forward and to escalate. And that's a dangerous situation to be in.
So they're a very clear strategic threat that Israel is certainly paying attention to.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're going to keep talking about Turkey a little bit, but I'm going to move to the last front, which is Gaza, of course. We're hearing a lot about what's going on in Gaza right now in the news. What's going on from where you sit?
Well, similar to Lebanon, but uglier, progress but unfinished business. And as we can see on the map, represented in red, Hamas still controls about half of the Gaza Strip. And, you know, I'll give it to them, at least they're honest and forthcoming for a change. And they're actually saying in Arabic and sometimes in other languages, we are not going to let anybody disarm us. So anybody thinking of, dreaming of, saying Hamas is being disarmed or going to be disarmed, the only organization that has the power to do that is the IDF, and currently that isn't in the cards. And as long as Hamas isn't disarmed, the future is one of jihad and of a Hamas aspiration to kill Jews. Those are the plain terms that we have to acknowledge. They still have fighting capability. They are fighting against the IDF as we speak. They are recruiting. They are trying to stockpile weapons and to scavenge capabilities after the damage that they sustained. And at the strategic level, coming back to Turkey, what we see on the ground represented in the Gaza microcosmos is Turkey being the muscle, Qatar being the money, but both of them really fueled and with the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood at heart, supporting Hamas and making sure that Hamas isn't undone. And the bottom line is one that is quite worrying.
So post-October 7th, post the war, Hamas is still standing.
Yeah.
What are the broader implications of that in the Middle East and as a message to the Middle East?
Well, it's not the message that we want the world and other terrorists to see, that you can do the atrocities that Hamas did on October 7. You can rape and butcher and maim and kidnap and all of the horrible things that they did, and get to govern the area on the other side at the end of the conflict. That isn't the outcome that we wanted, and I hope that the future will not be that. But it is a testament to the power of political Islam, to Turkey and Qatar influencing global events, and to their little representative Hamas on the ground. The results are, inconclusive. We've done work with Hamas, but at the end of the day, as long as they are there, their dream is to destroy Israel. Our job is to make sure that they don't have the means to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jonathan and I could stand here all night and speak about all the different challenges in the Middle East, but I will just leave you with this. As Jonathan has just outlined, the stakes are rising, the threats are multiplying, and the region truly stands on a razor's edge. What we all do, starting today and into the future, will absolutely help shape the future of the U.S.-Israel relationship and the future of the region. So thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thank you, and thank you. Shalom.